My stepdad always said this was his house. I didn't argue. Until the night he reminded me just how temporary I was. My name is Jasmine Carter. I'm 24 years old. And this is the story of how being treated like a guest in my own home slowly broke me. And then finally set me free. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. My stepdad Mark moved into our lives when I was 15. My biological father passed away years earlier, and my mom had spent a long time just trying to survive emotionally. When Mark came along, she seemed lighter, happier. I wanted that for her. I really did. At first, Mark was polite to me. Not warm but civil. He shook my hand instead of hugging me. Called me kid instead of my name. Small things I told myself didn't matter. But over time, the tone shifted. "This isn't a hotel," he'd say if I left a mug in the sink. "Lights cost money," if I stayed up studying late. "You should be grateful you can stay here," whenever I pushed back. Stay here, that word stuck with me. After college, I moved back home temporarily to save money. I worked full-time at a medical billing office and paid part of the utilities. I bought my own groceries. I cleaned. I stayed quiet. Still, I never felt like I belonged. Mark referred to my room as the spare. He knocked before entering, but never waited. If guests came over, he introduced me as my wife's daughter, never just family. At dinner, he controlled the conversation, the volume, the mood. My mom followed his lead like it was safer that way. I told myself it was temporary. Then came the rules. No laundry after 9 p.m., no friends over without notice. No cooking strong-smelling food, no leaving shoes by the door. Rules that didn't apply to him. One evening I came home exhausted after a double shift. My feet hurt. My head was pounding. I heated leftovers quietly and went to my room. Mark was waiting. He stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You didn't tell us you'd be late," he said. "I texted Mom," I replied calmly. He scoffed. "This is my house." "You check in with me." Something in my chest tightened. "I'm an adult," I said. "And I live here." The silence that followed felt heavy. "You live under my roof," he corrected. "Don't forget that." My mom appeared behind him, eyes flicking between us. She didn't say a word. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing something painful. I wasn't welcome. I was tolerated. The breaking point came a week later. I came home to find my belongings boxed up, my books, my photos. Even the blanket my grandmother gave me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Mark didn't even look guilty. "We need the room," he said casually. "My brother's visiting. You can sleep on the couch." The couch? In the house I'd grown up in. I looked at my mom, waiting for her to say something. Anything. She looked away. That was the moment something inside me went very quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I nodded and picked up a box.
"Okay," I said softly. Mark smirked, satisfied.
What he didn't know was that night was the last night I would ever feel powerless in that house. Because while he thought he was pushing me out, I was already planning my exit. And what came next changed everything. That night on the couch felt longer than any night I could remember. The living room smelled like Mark's cologne and stale coffee. The TV light flickered across the walls, even though it was muted. I curled up under a thin throw blanket, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Every sound felt like a reminder that I didn't belong here anymore. At some point, I heard my mom's bedroom door open. Soft footsteps, hesitation. She stopped near the couch. "Jasmine?" she whispered. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was asleep, but because I didn't trust my voice. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "It's just for a few nights. A few nights." I turned my head and looked at her. She stood there in her robe, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than I remembered. "It's okay," I said, even though it wasn't. "I'll manage." She nodded, relief flashing across her face, and went back to bed. That hurt more than Mark's words ever could. The next morning, I woke up early before anyone else. My neck ached. My phone battery was nearly dead. I gathered my things quietly and left for work without breakfast. At the office, I couldn't focus. I stared at the screen while numbers blurred together. My coworker asked if I was okay. I said I was just tired. That became my default answer. When I came home that evening, Mark's brother was already there, loud, opinionated, sitting in my chair like it had always been his. My boxed-up life was stacked neatly in the corner of the hallway, out of sight but not out of mind. Dinner was awkward. Mark laughed more than usual, playing the generous host. His brother made jokes about kids living at home too long, glancing at me like I was part of the punchline. My mom smiled too much and spoke too little. I chewed my food slowly, barely tasting it. That's when Mark leaned back in his chair and said it. "You know," he said casually, "this might be a good time for you to think about moving out." The table went silent. "I already am," I replied, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Good. Builds character." My mom's fork clinked against her plate. She didn't look up. That night I didn't sleep at all. I lay on the couch and stared at my phone, scrolling through rental listings I couldn't afford. Studios with cracked walls, shared spaces with strangers, prices that made my chest tighten. Still, the idea of staying felt worse. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I started packing my boxes properly. Clothes folded neatly, books stacked with care. I moved quietly, like a ghost passing through a place that no longer recognized me. Mark noticed. "Going somewhere?" he asked, leaning against the doorway.
Yes, I said. Soon, he nodded, satisfied.
Good. That afternoon, my Aunt Linda called. She rarely called. "I heard things are tense at home," she said gently. I froze. "Who told you?" "Your mom," she replied. "She's worried about you." That stung. "Did she tell you why?" I asked. Linda hesitated. "She said Mark thinks you're comfortable." Comfortable. I almost laughed. Instead, I told her the truth. About the couch, the boxes, the rules, the way I felt like a guest in the place I grew up. There was a long pause on the line. "Jasmine," Linda said slowly, "do you know whose name is actually on that house?" My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "Your mom never told you?" "Told me what?" "That your dad left his share of the house to you." I sat down hard on the edge of the couch. "What?" "Your biological father," she continued. "When he passed, his portion went into a trust. For you, your mom kept living there, of course, but legally," she trailed off. "Legally what?" I whispered. "Legally, Mark doesn't own it." My hands were shaking.
He's always acted like, I know, Linda said.
"And your mom let him." "But Jasmine, that house was meant to be your security." The room felt like it was spinning. That night, I asked my mom to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where homework used to spread across the surface, where birthdays were celebrated, where I used to feel safe. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. She stared at her hands. "I didn't want complications." "Mark treating me like a stranger isn't a complication?" I asked. Tears filled her eyes. "I was afraid." That word again. "Afraid. For years," I said. "I thought I was intruding. I thought I was a burden." She reached for my hand. "You were never a burden, but you let him make me feel like one." She didn't deny it. That night, Mark came home late. He saw us sitting together and frowned. "What's this about?" I stood up. "We need to talk," I said.
He laughed. About what? Your moving plans?
"No," I said steadily. "About the house." Something in my tone made him pause, and for the first time since he'd entered my life, Mark looked uncertain, because the truth he'd spent years ignoring was finally about to catch up with him. Mark didn't answer right away. He looked from me to my mom, then back to me, like he was trying to decide whether to laugh it off or shut it down. Finally, he scoffed. "The house?" he said. "What about it?" I stayed standing. My legs felt weak, but my voice didn't. "I know about the trust," I said. "I know my dad left his share to me." The room went completely still. My mom sucked in a sharp breath. Mark's face changed, not dramatically, not angrily, but in a way that told me everything. The easy confidence he always wore slipped, just for a second. "That's not relevant," he said quickly. "Your mother and I are married. This is our home." "It's relevant," I replied. "Because you've been treating me like I don't belong in a house my father helped pay for."
He laughed again, louder this time.
"You're 25, Jasmine. Adults move out." "I was trying to," I said. Quietly, respectfully, until you pushed me onto the couch. My mom finally spoke. Mark, he cut her off. Don't start. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, clarity. You set rules for me, I continued. No guests. No using the kitchen late. No space of my own. But you invite people over, take my room, and tell me to build character. Mark crossed his arms. You're being dramatic. Am I? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, you were comfortable as long as I stayed quiet. That struck a nerve. He leaned forward. You think you have power here because of some paperwork. It's not about power, I said. It's about respect. My mom stood up then, her chair scraping against the floor. Enough, she said softly but firmly. Both of you, she looked at Mark. You crossed a line. His eyes widened. Excuse me? You made my daughter feel unwanted in her own home, she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. And I let it happen. I stared at her, stunned. For years, she continued, I told myself keeping the peace mattered more. But I was wrong. Mark stared at her like he didn't recognize her. This house, she said, was built with love. And it will not be a place where my child feels like a guest. The silence that followed was heavy. Mark let out a slow breath. So what, you're taking her side now? I'm taking responsibility, she replied. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, sadness, anger that it took this long. Mark grabbed his keys. I'm not doing this tonight. He left, the door slamming behind him. That night, my mom sat with me on the couch, the same couch I'd slept on for weeks. I should have told you, she said, about the trust. About everything. Why didn't you? I asked. She swallowed. Because after your father died, I was scared of being alone. Mark felt steady, and I convinced myself that meant safe. I nodded slowly. He wasn't cruel at first, she said. But over time, I stopped correcting him. And you paid the price. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. The next few days were tense. Mark barely spoke to me. When he did, his words were clipped, careful. Like he was suddenly aware that the ground under his feet wasn't as solid as he thought. I went to the bank with Aunt Linda. We reviewed the documents. The trust was real. My name was there in black and white. Not ownership of the whole house, but enough to matter. Enough that I wasn't powerless. When Mark found out I'd gone to the bank, he exploded. So now you're bringing lawyers into this?
He snapped. I'm protecting myself, I said calmly. From what?
He demanded. I looked him straight in the eye. From being erased, that shut him up. A week later, Mark told my mom he needed space. He packed a bag and left for a while. The house felt different without him. Quieter, lighter, but not peaceful, not yet. One evening, my mom knocked on my door. She'd helped me move my bed back into my old room. I've been thinking, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed, about what comes next. I waited. I don't want you rushing out because you feel pressured, she continued. This is your home too. Tears burned my eyes. Thank you, but something inside me had already changed. I realized that staying wasn't the same as belonging. A few days later, I got an email from a small firm downtown. A position I'd applied for months ago, before everything fell apart. They wanted to interview me. I walked into that interview with my head high. I spoke clearly, honestly, about independence, about growth. I got the job. When I told my mom, she hugged me like she used to when I was little. I'm proud of you, she said. So was I that night. Mark came back. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same place he once told me to move out. I didn't realize how bad it got, he said stiffly. I studied him carefully. I believe you, I replied. But that doesn't undo it. He nodded slowly. I owe you an apology. He did, and he gave it, but apologies don't rewind time. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of the room I grew up in, I understood something important. That night on the couch didn't just change how I saw Mark. It changed how I saw myself. And I wasn't done yet. I started packing 2 days after I got the job offer. Not because anyone asked me to leave. Not because Mark was back, walking carefully around the house like a guest himself. And not because my mom suddenly needed space. I packed because something inside me had already moved on. At first, it was just small things. Books from my shelf, clothes I hadn't worn in years. Old notebooks filled with half-finished dreams. Each item I folded felt like proof that I had survived something I once thought would break me. My mom noticed, of course. One evening, she stood in my doorway, watching me tape a box shut. "You don't have to go," she said quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed. "I know," she hesitated. "Is it because of Mark?" I shook my head. Not entirely. The truth was harder to say out loud. This house held too many versions of me, the girl who stayed silent, the girl who learned to shrink, the girl who slept on the couch pretending it didn't hurt. "I need to choose myself," I said finally. She nodded, eyes glassy. "I wish I'd taught you that sooner." A few days later, Mark asked if we could talk. We sat at the kitchen table again, the same place where so many unspoken rules had been enforced without discussion. "I'm trying to understand where I went wrong," he said. I folded my hands in front of me. "You treated authority like ownership," he frowned. "I was trying to run a household." "No," I said gently. "You were trying to control one." That landed harder than I expected. "I didn't realize how much space I was taking," he admitted. "I did," I replied. "Every day." He nodded slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm working on it." "I hope you are," I said honestly. "For Mom's sake," he swallowed. "And yours?" I met his eyes. "For yours." That was the most truth I could offer. The week before my move, the house felt strangely peaceful. My mom cooked dinners again. Music played softly in the evenings. Mark kept his distance, not cold, just careful. Still, I knew staying would slowly undo the progress I'd made. The night before I left, my mom handed me a small envelope. "I was going through some old things," she said. "I thought you should have this." Inside was a letter. My father's handwriting. "Jasmine, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you how proud I am of you. I set things up so you'd always have a place to stand even if the ground shifts. Never make yourself small to keep others comfortable." I cried quietly, the kind of cry that feels like release instead of pain. The next morning, as I loaded the last box into my car, Mark stood by the door. "You'll always be welcome here," he said. I smiled politely. "Thank you," but welcome and belonging were no longer the same thing to me. My new apartment wasn't fancy. 1 bedroom, thin walls, a view of the parking lot. But when I set my boxes down and locked the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The first night, I slept on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the hum of the city outside. No footsteps overhead, no rules I hadn't agreed to. Just quiet. A few weeks passed. I settled into work, made friends, built routines that were entirely my own. Then one afternoon, my mom called. "Mark's moving out," she said. I closed my eyes. "Are you okay?" "I think so," she replied. "We're going to counseling, separately." I let out a slow breath. "I'm proud of you." "So am I," she said. "Of both of us." When I visited the house a month later, it felt different. Not because Mark was gone, but because I was no longer afraid of it. I walked through the rooms without shrinking. Sat where I wanted, spoke when I felt like it. At dinner, my mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You changed things," she said. "We changed them," I corrected. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I realized something important. The night I was told to sleep on the couch wasn't the end of my place in that house. It was the beginning of my place in myself. And for the first time, I didn't need permission to belong anywhere, because in the final part, I would finally understand what home really means and why losing one version of it saved me. It took me a long time to understand that healing doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly, in moments you don't expect. Like realizing one day that you're no longer bracing yourself when your phone rings. Or noticing that your shoulders aren't tense when you unlock your own front door. 3 months after I moved out, my life looked nothing like I imagined it would during those nights on the couch. My job was demanding but fair. My coworkers treated me like an equal, not a burden. I paid my bills on time. I cooked dinner when I felt like it and ate cereal when I didn't. I filled my apartment with little things that made me smile: plants I somehow kept alive, thrifted art, a lamp that cast warm light instead of shadows. I was building something. One Sunday morning, my mom came over for coffee. She sat at my tiny kitchen table, hands wrapped around her mug, looking around like she was memorizing everything. You look lighter, she said. I feel lighter, I replied. She nodded. I've been thinking a lot about boundaries. I raised an eyebrow. You? She laughed softly. I know, but it turns out I had none. She told me she and Mark were officially separated. No drama. No shouting. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something had broken long before either of them wanted to admit it. I spent so long trying to keep the family together, she said, voice trembling. I didn't realize I was losing you in the process. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You didn't lose me, but I almost did, she whispered. That honesty mattered more than any apology. A few weeks later, Mark reached out.
He asked if we could talk. Neutral ground. A cafe downtown.
I considered saying no. But avoidance wasn't strength anymore. It was just fear in better packaging. So I went. He looked older somehow. Less sure of himself. When he spoke, there was no authority in his voice. I've been in therapy, he said. Learning uncomfortable things. I smiled faintly. Those tend to stick. I grew up believing respect came from control, he admitted. And when I felt that slipping, I tightened my grip. I nodded. That grip pushed me away. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. I forgive you, I said. Not to fix the past, but to free myself from it. He swallowed hard. Thank you. We finished our coffee, said goodbye. And that was it. No reconciliation, no promise of family dinners. Just closure, the kind that lets you breathe again. A few months later, my mom sold the house. She called me before listing it. I want to do this clean, she said. And right. We reviewed the trust together. I didn't fight for more than what was fair. I didn't need to. When the sale finalized, I used my portion as a down payment. Not on a house yet, just a future. The day I signed the paperwork, I sat in my car afterward and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. I thought about the girl who slept on a couch, pretending it didn't hurt to hear laughter from a room that used to be hers. I thought about how small she felt, how invisible. And I wished I could tell her something. You're not weak for staying quiet, but you're brave for deciding to speak. Now, when people ask about my family, I tell the truth, but gently. We're learning, I say. And we are. My mom and I have a better relationship now than we ever did when we lived under the same roof. We talk openly. We don't pretend. We don't sacrifice honesty for harmony. As for me, I no longer confuse tolerance with love. I no longer shrink to fit spaces that don't respect me. And I no longer mistake a house for a home. Home isn't where you're allowed to exist. It's where you're encouraged to be whole. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this: you don't have to be loud to reclaim your worth. You don't have to burn bridges to walk away stronger. And sometimes the moment you're treated like a guest is the moment you realize you were never meant to stay small. Losing that house didn't take anything from me. It gave me myself back. And that was worth everything.